Welcome to Survivor Shift, moving from surviving to thriving. I'm Tammy Renee, your host, and I am so excited to have with me today Sharon Switek. I'm going to read her intro. She's got a lot of cool things that I'd like to share with you about her. Sharon Switek is an award-winning trauma educator, an author, and attorney, having worked with trauma survivors in her personal and professional capacity for over 30 years. She is also the creator of Surviving Together, a YouTube channel which is a safe place for trauma survivors to connect and build community on their healing journeys, as well as provides trauma-related education to survivors and non-survivors alike. I would recommend it to anybody. I've found some great content there, and I had the honor of being a guest on that YouTube channel with her. Her work in the trauma field was recognized by Women Changing the World Awards when chosen as the 2025 regional and global winner of the Women in Journalism and Media category. As a survivor herself, Sharon is passionate about helping survivors see their true potential and dedicated to spreading mental health awareness to reduce the stigma of trauma. I love that. And I think it just sums what I know of you up just beautifully. So excited to have you on this podcast. And just so everybody knows, she's going to be on also the Building on the Light podcast at a later date. But we're excited to start with Survivor Shift. So, Sharon, tell me about your experiences with trauma and the things that brought you to a place where you knew you needed to make a shift.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you, Tammy, for having me on. I'm so excited to be here, and it was an absolute joy to have you on my channel as well. So, I'm just feel really fortunate that we've been able to make this connection. For me, my trauma, I'm a survivor of childhood sexual assault, and adult sexual assault, and it those experiences really, shapes you in terms of who you become. And later on in life, often wondering who you could have been were it not for this trauma, right?
Right.
So my trauma journey starts fairly young. To the best of my recollection, I was 4 years old. Um, I had individual experiences with several different people. So it wasn't as if I was abused by one person over a span of years. So it's a little different than some people's experience with childhood sexual abuse. But my earliest memories are very, very fragmented in terms of the trauma. I
Mhm.
remember my brother is 3 years older than I, and we had some neighbors down the street, and they had a girl who was roughly my age, a boy roughly his age, and he got invited to go to a sleepover there, and I desperately wanted to go. I wanted to do what my brother was doing. I'm like, I want to sleep over too. I want to do something, fun or whatever. So they finally agreed because it was only 3 doors down, and they knew these people. And I remember not really having a great time. The girl, we never really connected very much, but when it came time to sleep, my brother was in the room with the boy, and I thought I would just share the room with the girl, but instead I was put in the living room, and I wasn't given the couch, I was given the floor. And I just kind of thought the whole thing was weird, but I'm like, well, I asked to sleep over, and I wasn't gonna say I want to go back home, right? I was committed to this. I remember being on the floor. I remember being freezing cold because I only had a blanket, and I think I pulled a pillow from the couch. It was very much an afterthought. I felt, and I remember seeing the father coming down the hall. Um, I remember him saying something to me. I don't know what. I remember him being close to me. For a long time, I felt like he was just on his way to the kitchen and was just getting a glass of water and was like, don't be scared, it's just me, just wanted to, just go into the kitchen. And I think I kind of convinced myself that that was it. But because I didn't have any really concrete memories, I don't remember him touching me. I don't remember anything specific. I do know that I was petrified the rest of the night. Um, as soon as the first light hit, I was out of there and I went home.
Mm.
And it was a bizarre experience because when you don't have concrete memories, you don't believe anything happened. And I bring this specific instance up because I know a lot of people later on in life will start remembering trauma or looking at a situation through a trauma lens and start wondering, did something happen there? Or am I filling in blanks that don't need filling in? So, for a long, long time, I felt like I didn't have a right to feel like anything was wrong, that wasn't a traumatic experience. I did have a recurring nightmare for years and years afterwards of this just person, coming at me and almost getting to me, and then the nightmare would end. And I had it for years. And I've always also had a deep-seated fear of anything being placed in front of my face. Even now, I'm not going to put my hands right in front of my face. And I truly believe that a pillow or something was put over my face to either, keep me from screaming or to keep me quiet or something. Um, because I've always had that fear. And so I just lived with it, and you just tried to forget that really anything had happened, or not even thinking that anything did because I couldn't remember it. But trauma does something to you, and it eats away at your self-confidence. And especially when you can't remember memories concretely, you second guess yourself and, wonder, just start wondering about yourself, and you're not as confident.
Right.
And I think combined with, I had a very chaotic um, home life. My parents argued constantly. There was yelling all the time in my house. And my brother is very, very different from me. So we never really had a relationship. So even though I was part of a family, I still was kind of on my own.
Mm.
So I was very vulnerable to people paying attention to me. Um, so any attention is good attention because at least you're like, hey, somebody wants to be with me. And so several years later, we had moved to a new place, and there was a friend of my brother's, and he was a couple years older than my brother, so he was probably 5 or 6 years older than I was, and I was 6, 7 at this time, and it was the son of my mother's best friend, so she got to know this family, and they were like on the other block, but we cut through the backyards, right? So it was, not too far, kitty corner, from us. And he started wanting to play with me when we got together, because again, they had a daughter who was a year younger than I, so, and it was my mother's best friend, so we tried to do things together, and they wanted the kids to play together. And I remember there was one specific time, I don't know where the other kids went, but you know, back in the day, we used to get refrigerators and stuff and washing machines. They used to come in the big cardboard boxes,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so when anybody had one of those, it was like, keep it, because these were tunnels. We could make things out of this, and we absolutely loved it.
Right.
So
Right.
they had gotten all new appliances, so they had like 3 or 4 of these, and they made these tunnels out of them. And I was in the tunnel, and I distinctly remember him wanting to play doctor. And you're I was really conflicted about that because, there's that piece of me that, I didn't get a huge education in terms of good touch, bad touch, or anything. I mean, this is the 80s we're talking
Right.
about, at this point, or late 70s. Um, but I knew my body was mine. And so I was hesitant, but then again, he's like, it's play, and he wants to play with me, and he wants attention, right? And so
Right.
I went along with it. And there were several instances, then follow-up instances with that. And for a long time, again, I looked at that and said, I don't have a right to call that trauma. I didn't know that word at the time, right? But I don't have a right to say that anything was wrong with that or that I was a victim of anything, because this was another kid. Yes, he was older than I was, maybe 12, 13 at the time, but he's still a kid. They can't be abusers,
Oh man.
right? And child on child abuse didn't really become an acceptable, say, an acceptable, a recognized thing until really after the 2000s. And
Right.
I'm going to say even a little bit later than that. Um, and now that we know that, yes, you can still be abused, even if the person is under 18 who is abusing you or under 16, this is still abuse.
Yeah.
And he was old enough to know better. So it becomes tricky when it's other kids, right? Because kids are
Right.
curious and we want to explore, and you've got different parts than I do.
Right.
So, when we're talking about child on child abuse, you really need to look at the age discrepancy and the maturity level in
Right.
terms of that. And so when I was able to look at that through a trauma lens later on, I was able to say, yes, I was a victim. And so that's for that reason that I bring up those instances.
Right.
And then we moved again. We moved every 3 years when I was young because of my dad's job. And we moved many states away. And I thought, okay, well, whatever I thought, whatever I was feeling, I'm leaving that all behind. I'm starting a whole new life in a whole new state. I was
Yep.
about, 9, 10, 11. Those were kind of the years that I was in the new state. And it's all behind me. And
Right.
we'll just put that away in a box, forget about it. Never happened, right? As a lot of us try to do with our trauma.
Yep.
And it just it doesn't work because it still seeps out in our behaviors and how we view the world and how we react to other people. And I didn't know any of this, but you know, my confidence was at an all-time low, my self-esteem, and I'm moving to a new place again, and still the same chaotic home life. My mom is working at this by this time, so we're typical latchkey kids where we come home and it's just us. And my brother was totally had his own life. So again, I'm just me and isolated, and I'm the new kid again. And I'm from New York and I'm moving to the Midwest and I have a thick New York accent and I'm just totally the outsider. And what I later discovered through doing trauma work is that kids who are subjected to especially sexual abuse when they're younger have a really hard time developing social relationships and understanding how to connect with other kids.
Right.
And especially when it comes to bullying or criticism, we have a very thin skin because we're looking at what they're saying through a totally different lens.
Right.
Whereas somebody who's never been through trauma could take some ribbing and maybe even give it back. We internalize that and see that as a reflection of ourselves. And
Yep.
I wholly remember that being the case. And
Right.
just my dad was very much a perfectionist, so I had to try and be as perfect as I could with how I behaved at home and the grades that I got at school. So school really was my outlet. It was the only thing I felt good at. I know we talked
Yep.
about this, right?
Yep. Yes, I
um
can totally relate.
except for the bullying aspect. So if you could ignore
Right.
that, so I developed relationships with my teachers, and they were really my saviors. And I do remember I was there in fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, and my sixth grade teacher was just an absolute angel of a woman. And when I finally even moved, she gave me a journal to write in, and she's like, "You're a great student, and you've got so much potential." And this is the first time any teacher like singled me out to say that I was worthy, right? And hearing that when you don't hear it at home. I mean, I love my
Right.
mother, and my mother was a wonderful, kind, warm person. But if something was wrong, her way of fixing it was giving you hugs and saying it's going to be okay. There was no steps to fix anything. It was just providing maternal, warmth, right?
Right.
And if I was to approach my dad with anything, he was very much, all right, well, let's break it down. And it was pretty much, well, what did you do wrong? And so what do we need to fix? right? Instead of looking and saying, well, an adult may have done something wrong. Maybe they were in the wrong. But we grew up with respect your elders, they know best, right? And you
Yep.
have that type of environment. So again, you're internalizing all of those negative things about yourself. And there were when I lived in New York, there was one other instance that had happened with the son of friends of my parents. And he was in his early 20s and I was 8. So we're talking there's a good discrepancy. But my parents would go
Right.
over for like movie night, and of course, instead of hiring a babysitter, we would go over and try to entertain ourselves separate from the movie. And they had this huge train set up in the basement. I mean, I'm talking like, sheets and sheets of plywood with the electric trains on it. And so we'd often go down and just play with those. And conversations started turning a little odd in terms of my interactions with this son. And I
Mm.
thought things were weird. But
Right.
again, you're getting attention from somebody. They want to spend some time with you. They want to do something with you.
And also without the education about your own body and your own like really talking about your personal power and what you
Yes.
can say no to and what's yes and when to, you get that uh-oh feeling, go ahead and leave the situation kind of stuff. But without that education that fortunately we have now, right?
Yes.
Then what do you even do with it? How do you even process what's going on and make a sensible decision, right? About whether or not to stay
A
in
hundred
the
percent. I
situation.
mean, we grew up with stranger danger. Don't accept candy from somebody. Don't go looking for their lost puppy. It was all
Right,
about being snatched on the street, right? Or from the
right,
park or something of that
right,
nature. We didn't talk about abuse that happens in the home or abuse that happens from another child or from a family friend. My parents
right,
trusted these people. And they
right,
obviously trusted the son enough to watch over their kids while we were here. So you have that dissonance in your mind
right, right,
about, do I trust my gut that something feels wrong, or do I trust my parents that they trust this person and
right.
that he's not going to do anything bad? And so without that education, we don't trust our gut. And I can't tell you
Right.
how many times I would get a funny feeling about whatever, even later on in life, in my
Mhm.
early 20s, about a relationship. Should I keep dating this person? And you get that funny feeling and you push it down because you learn not to trust your gut.
Right.
And
That's a good way of putting it, not trusting your own gut. Yeah,
oh, huge. And
yeah.
the research that they've done now between the gut brain connection and this is really, they call it our second brain. They call our gut our second brain. It is really our first line of defense in terms of something's wrong. You're going to feel it there before you're going to logically think it. And so trusting our gut in all kinds of situations, even when it's just, a danger, you feel watched and you can't even find the source, right? Our gut
Right.
knows. We get that funny feeling. So again, I just kind of went along with the situation, and it ended up that he exposed himself to me, and the evening ended, and I don't think that I went over there again because I don't remember anything after that. But when I had moved, we had been there for a few years, and this family was moving from New York to another state, and they were going to be passing through our state in order to get there. And so they're like, "Hey, let's stop and see the Switex, right?" My parents told me that they were coming, and whew, I I
Mm.
loved the parents. They were such nice people, right?
Right.
And I asked, "This is the son coming too?" And they said, "Well, yeah." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm
Mm.
just not liking that, and I really don't want to talk to him or whatever." And I think, well, I want to see the parents, and I'll try and be as nice as possible, and I'll just stick to my room or something.
Right.
So they stopped by, and after kind of, the all initial highs are done, my parents and their, the son's parents kind of pair off and, catch up or whatever.
Right.
And I'm like, I'll just go to my room or whatever. And the son said, "Oh, I'll go play with her." And of course, I didn't want to be rude. I didn't want to say like no, whatever. They're like, "Oh, great. That's wonderful. Thank you for watching over her." So the two of us trot off to my room. And I'm like, "Oh, crap. What do I do now? How do I
Right.
manage this situation?" And so I'm like, "Well, let's just play a game. Let's figure out a game to play." And I don't remember if we played other games, but I remember distinctly we decided to play Hangman. And he we had played a few games, and then I got to the point with him where he had done the dashes and stuff, and I
Right.
started filling in letters, and I'm expecting something normal that a kid would guess or whatever,
Right.
or a phrase that's popular or something, and it had to do with him exposing himself to me because he kept talking about it and trying to remind me of it, and
Oh, wow.
maybe we should do that again. I'm like, I don't remember anything, I don't know what you're talking about, and just
Oh,
trying to
man.
wave it off and not. And so finally he's like, oh, I'm gonna write it out basically. And at that
Whoa.
point, I just, fight, fight, freeze, or flee. I chose flee, and I immediately, I didn't finish. I didn't finish it. I finally got to what he was getting at, and then he's like,
Yeah.
hey, we should do that again. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. And I left, and I just kind of
Did
hung
you ever
around
say
my
anything to
parents.
anybody? Did you ever say anything to anybody?
Yeah, so later on that day, I finally got up the gumption because I was still shaken by it, and they
Yeah.
were there. And I don't remember if they had just left or if they were still there. No, they, because of what my mother said, they were still there at the time. And um but it was later in the day, and I remember I was on the basement stairs with my mom, and I stopped her, and I that told her what happened with the game. I didn't tell her anything else that it was
Right.
previous to it. Just told her about the game. And you have to remember, I'm about 11 at this point in time, and this guy's probably in his mid 20s at this point in time. And my mom looked at me and she said, don't worry about it. He was probably just trying to see how far he could get with you. Just
Oh,
just stay away from him. And I just remember totally freezing at that moment and looking at her because I wholly expected her to verify that this was wrong and
right. To
that
maybe throw a fit and go say, "Oh my gosh, do you know what your son did?" or whatever.
yeah, or just even to
Oh,
validate that this wasn't a correct thing.
right.
But by her saying that, I thought, okay, I guess I'm making too big of a deal out of this,
Mm,
right? And that stayed with me for a long time. I was angry at my mom for a really, really long time
right.
after that. And I didn't trust myself anymore, when it came to sexual situations. Um, so I was I was a tease. I guess I was called a tease because I was willing to kind of do things, when I was in my teenage years, but yet I wasn't. Like I still
Right.
had this
Right.
feeling that, okay, well, I don't want to do it, so I shouldn't, but maybe I'm making too big of a deal out of it. And so
Right.
I really had a hard time with relationships in terms when it got down to anything sexual as to what I should or shouldn't be doing. Um,
Right.
because it still had this, you wait until marriage, that was always the standard, right? You wait until marriage. So I had that on one hand, but on the other hand, I had this, I'm making too big of a deal out of some stuff. So I didn't know how to act with any of it. And I was really confused. And so again, I didn't feel like I had a right to call myself a victim with anything.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I went through life, I just again it's just like, okay, well, we'll just put that away and put it in a box and we'll forget about it. Some years go by, we moved to Michigan where I live now. Um, and I had one final straw. in terms of this. And I was babysitting for our next door neighbors, and the father came home, and he had asked me if I had ever done oral sex. And I was 14, and I was like,
Oh my gosh.
um, no, don't. No,
Oh my gosh.
you know, like you don't know what to say to that, right? I was stumbling all over my words, I remember. And he's just like, "Well, do you want to try it?" I'm like, no, not really." And I felt proud of myself because I was like standing up for
Right. You
myself, and
stood
I
up
thought,
for
okay,
yourself, but
like that's going to be the end of it. But no, I was on the couch, and there was a bathroom that was direct line of sight, like powder room, right? Just the toilet.
right.
And he went in there, and I don't use the facilities, I don't know, but he opened the door. And when he opened the door and I looked over, and of course his pants were down, and he's just
Oh
like, "Are you
man.
sure you don't want to?" And I just
Oh,
got up and left. I never got paid for that job. I just got
oh,
up, I left, and I remember walking down my driveway and just thinking, what is it about me? Do I have a bullseye on my head?
right.
Do I have abuse victim, please abuse me, written on my forehead, that this keeps happening to me? Like,
Yeah.
that they just know that this has been done before. I mean, I was so upset by it. And I finally decided to say something. And I actually spoke to my grandmother who was living with us. Excuse me. And was just kind of speaking about sexual abuse in general. I wasn't getting into any real specifics. I thought that I would just talk about my past, not about what had happened there. But I did end up revealing to her after we had talked for a little while that I think that I had been abused maybe in the past,
Right.
and some things that happened. And I spoke about things that had happened in New York. And I don't really remember much of what she said. She did reveal some of her own trauma to me, and that made me feel seen. That wow,
Right.
this if things if this isn't something that's unique to me, maybe
Right.
this has been maybe I'm not as weird as I think I am.
Yeah.
And so I felt a little sense of peace after that conversation. What I didn't expect was that she told my parents that night about it, and I got called to the living room, and immediately my dad started yelling at me,
Oh my
and
gosh, Sharon.
I was
Why?
mortified. He wanted to know exactly what happened, how it happened, what, and I understand now, and I have spoken to him about this because pretty much what I've spoken to you about is what I wrote about in my book. And I had to have a conversation with my parents before I wrote my book because I was going to reveal these things, and I
Right.
wanted them to be aware of it. What I understand now from my dad, one, my dad came at things from anger. That was his primary focus,
Okay.
and whether he will ever state it or not, he had a lot of PTSD from the Vietnam War.
Oh,
And, that anger is one of the main things with males, especially, that we find when they have post-traumatic stress syndrome. And that was definitely my dad. He could go from 0 to 60 in no time. I understand now he was angry about the situation. He was angry that he couldn't protect me. When he found out everything that had happened, he was angry that the statute of limitations would have passed, that he couldn't do anything about it. He didn't know how to express anything else other than his anger. But being the recipient of his anger for my
right.
entire life, I took that as I've done something wrong.
Right.
I
Right.
didn't tell when I should have. And if I had told when I should have, he could have done something about this. So it's my fault, right?
Right.
And that's what I took from that. And that's what I held on to for a lot of years.
Right.
What I
And
also took,
understanding, I'm sorry,
no, go ahead.
um, I just want to make this point. Understanding why our parents or whoever we trusted reacted the way they did does not negate the negative impact it has on our own healing and our own ability to process, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah,
We still have
I
those
think
negative
acknowledging
feelings.
that, but still acknowledging the trauma,
Hmm.
even, of their reaction is really an important part of healing, wouldn't you say?
100%. You know, for a long time, I felt, nothing good ever came out of me disclosing, right? I tried to disclose to my
Right.
mom, I disclosed to my grandmother. She told my parents. My dad had his reaction. I'm like, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm going to just put it away in a box and I'm not going to think about it. Well, when I got to college, I had an opportunity to work with abuse victims of various traumatic events. And I felt a real kinship with them, you know. I felt like I was one of them, that I had been a victim or that I was a survivor. I understood what they were going through. And so I had this split inside me that it was like, how can I understand them so well? How can I empathize with them so much? But yet on the other side, I've always been told that either I was making too big of a deal out of something, or that I was wrong for doing something, or I couldn't remember what had happened. It was a kid. How could that person be an abuser? So I really felt like, maybe am I trying to make myself an abuser because I'm trying to get attention or something? I really was looking at myself and trying to figure this all out as I'm in my late teens. And I finally got to a point where I went to the school counselor at college because my brain was just all messed up. And I needed, maybe this person will tell me what I need to hear, or what,
Right.
be able to help me and say what's going on. And I can get a definitive answer on this.
Right.
And after going through everything, and I purged, and I told her absolutely everything and everything I felt about each individual instance as well. And she got to the end and she said, listen, if you feel like a victim, you are a victim. And let's look at your individual things. Just because you can't remember doesn't mean that you weren't abused. Just because the other person was still technically a child doesn't mean that you weren't abused.
Yep.
Just because somebody only exposed themselves to you and didn't actually touch you, or there wasn't penetration, doesn't mean that you weren't abused. So learning that touch can be an abuse, learning that just somebody propositioning you like I had and exposing themselves to me, that is abuse.
Right.
I grew up thinking sexual assault equals rape. That equals somebody having sex with you, right? And so if
Right.
that didn't happen, again, why do I feel all of this?
Right.
Being given the permission to count myself as a survivor, as a prior abuse victim, that was my shift moment. That was the
Oh,
moment
okay.
I didn't begin to heal right then, but at least I was able to say, okay, yes, I have a right to feel what I feel because something bad happened to me.
Right. Acknowledging the reality, right? Instead
Oh,
of we get all in our head, and even people that are trying to help, they try to be logical about it. It's not about your logic.
mm-hmm.
It's about well, it is about your logic. It affects your logic, right? But it's about that effect of your ability to think clearly, the feelings that you have no place for them to go, and all that. So I love that. So that's your shift, was
Yeah,
acknowledging the reality that you were indeed an abuse victim.
absolutely 100%.
Wow.
And, you know, there is no right way to feel about it.
Right.
Um, we will go through a range of emotions as we deal with our trauma, and none of them are bad. We have a right to feel whatever we feel. Some of them we may need to work through because they're not healthy reactions for the long term.
Right.
But we have a right to feel all of that, and that settled something within me. Just being able to understand, yeah, the reality of what happened. And so I moved forward with my life. I got married, and I started working with abuse victims and volunteer, and just talking to other people if they ever were hinting at things, I would try and draw that out of them a little bit, let them know, hey, I get where you're coming from. I completely
And it's safe.
understand.
And it's safe.
Yes. And I'm an okay person to talk to. And those are just kind of private, one-on-one conversations. And I just tried to really move on with my life, but it wasn't until much later, and I'm going to say maybe 5 years ago or so. No, more than that. I started volunteering with the YWCA and as a victim advocate. And those are people who, when somebody comes in for a forensic exam, the nurse will be there, and then they call a victim advocate in to help them, to talk to them, to make sure they have a safe place to
Right.
go, to give them resources, just to be a support, right?
Right.
And I did that for a year, and I was on call all the time, and I really found value in that work.
Mhm.
And I found that I could empathize so much with these people because I had been there myself. And working so closely and so often with other victims was extremely empowering to me
Yes.
because it gave value to my story. I
Right.
could do something for somebody else because of what I had been through. And that really was, I think, the start of my healing journey, really truly healing.
Right.
Um,
That almost sounds like another shift then, the first shift being able to accept, right? And the
yeah,
second shift being, what can I do with it? Okay, I've acknowledged the garbage. I've acknowledged all the hard stuff. What do I do now? What do I do with it?
in my mid 20s, I was diagnosed officially with depression. Hadn't known that I had had depression before.
Right.
And I started seeing somebody because it was affecting my marriage at the time as well. And fortunately for me, this was a trauma-informed person. And this is the mid
Oh,
90s. And so that was
right.
fairly unique. They didn't call it
Yeah,
trauma-informed, but she had worked with other survivors before. So she
right.
kind of had that background. Um, and so that was kind of a mini start to my healing journey, but we were
Right.
so much more focused on my day-to-day life and just trying to make my marriage work and make my work life work that
Right.
we
Right.
didn't really delve into all that, base, right? But I did start to kind of understand some more things. And so then, yeah, when I was able to work with victims more one-on-one, um, and put value to what I had done, that's when I started to read more about trauma and to try and understand more about sexual abuse and what it does to you, and learning how to deal with the effects that we go through, the hypervigilance, the low self-esteem, the depression,
Right.
all of that. But I will tell you that I had another, probably my third major shift when I started my channel 2 years ago, because we are just on my anniversary of being on for 2 years. And the research that I had to do to present the channel and present the material in the way that I wanted. I'm not an expert in it. I have lived experience. I'm
Right.
not a
Right.
psychologist. I'm not a counselor. And I felt, well, if I'm going to have this trauma space for people and I'm going to be presenting what trauma is or how it affects us, I need to know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So I
Right.
did so much research. And that first year, was just putting the basics out there. What trauma is? What are the trauma effects? How does it affect us? Trauma in sleep, trauma in your body. I mean, you name it. We kind of just went through
Right.
all of the basics. And that was an education even for me because I got to understand what I went through at such a deeper level,
Right.
realizing how common it is that people don't remember all the details of their abuse. And it's
Right.
because of the way the brain processes trauma. And
Right.
especially for a young child, they are only going to remember those things that are like really significant, that stand out, and often fit into their current worldview. So if
Right.
this hasn't ever happened before, I couldn't process. if I had been
Right.
touched or whatever did happen, my brain had no context for that. So
Right.
it kind of just took that away from my consciousness, you know,
Yep.
conscious awareness. And our brain does that to protect us.
Yes. Absolutely.
And over the years, I did recall pieces.
Yep.
And so what I've told you is kind of the most of what I've remembered at this point in time. I didn't remember all of that right away. And
Right.
our brain will release that to us when we feel safe, when it feels
Yes.
like,
Yep.
okay, we think you can handle this. So we're going to
Yep.
let this memory float up, and it's up to you what you
Yep.
do with it, but we're going to release it, right? And I know you know exactly what I'm talking
Yep.
about
I
with
do.
this.
I do. I do. Yeah.
And so that really understanding um, trauma at that deep level and talking to people and how can we work through this? How do we heal? What tools can we use? It put things that I've been on and off in therapy since I was 13, right? And it
Right.
put some of those things that they tried to tell me in a different perspective in terms of using this tool to help you deal with trauma, understanding emotional regulation,
Right. Right.
and that it wasn't that I just was an emotional person or that I got upset too easy, you know?
Right.
And being
And
able
you're
then
not
to,
looking for attention or whatever. Yeah.
right, not looking for a fight. That was another one I always heard too. You're just looking for a fight. You just want to fight. No, no, I don't. But I didn't have the words to put
Right.
it into any other context, right? So I I really was able to understand my own body, recognize when I was getting emotionally unregulated and learning what can we do about this. And so
Right.
learning all of those positive coping skills like breathing exercises or w- why did I have periods of my life where I didn't feel as bad? Well, guess what? I was really, really active and I
Right.
was doing stuff all the time. So I had those dopamine and endorphins
Right.
going through
Right.
my body that were helping me and understanding, hey, guess what? That's a positive coping skill. That's something we can
Yeah.
reach to as well. And
Right.
researching all of these positive coping skills and being able to have them in your toolbox, it it has allowed me to be in a better mind space more often than not. I still have my
Right.
bad days,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. But it doesn't mean it's all bad, you know?
And it doesn't mean that it's going to be for weeks or months at a time because I did
Right.
have that along my healing
Right.
journey where I
Yep.
would just shut down and
Yep.
everything just felt, worthless. I had a nervous breakdown when I was 40 because I lost my job, my home, and my husband in 10 days, in a 10-day
Oh,
period of
wow.
time. So I
Wow.
moved out. I moved out of my house, divorced my husband, and lost my job in 10 days, and I just broke.
Oh,
And
man.
I kind of survived for the next 10 years and put myself back together. And I understood a lot more about myself during that time afterwards as to how we can be just living, but not really surviving. Or some people may say surviving, but not thriving.
Living. Right.
I, I was doing the basics to get along. And sometimes that's as much as we can do.
Right. And that's a win. You know, when we can hang on
Yeah,
and survive for right now, you know what? Surviving is a big win. You know,
absolutely.
it's a huge thing that we definitely need to acknowledge, pat ourselves on the back, whatever,
Yeah, you made it to
surviving.
another day.
Yeah. And if you can get through from surviving to the thriving point, great. I mean, that's
Hmm.
even, but that surviving, you got to survive first. I mean, that's if you can hang on until you can get to a better place.
I always say survivors are the strongest people I know because they lived through it and they came out the other side. Even if they
Yep.
don't feel that they're in a good place, it takes a lot of internal strength to be able to go through whatever you went through and to still be putting one foot in front of the other and waking
Yep.
up each day and saying,
Yep.
okay, I'm going to make it through this day. And
Right.
I was watching a friend's podcast, and she's moved from just existing to living,
Right.
and because she had some changes in her life. And somebody asked in her live, said, how do you go from struggling to really living if all you've known all your life is struggling? And that really hit me.
Right.
And I see it all the time with trauma survivors who are deep in depression, who have anxiety, who maybe have panic attacks, and just getting from one day to the next is a monumental feat. And how do you get from that point to being able to feel joy again? And it
Right.
really, truly comes down to learning those positive coping skills, learning what works for you in a particular situation,
Right.
learning an array of positive coping skills, because maybe one day you reach for that coping skill. It worked yesterday. Guess what? It's
Yeah.
not working so well today. So you need to
Right.
be able to put that back and reach for something else. We have to have multitudes, and we have to practice those skills at times that we're feeling okay.
Right. Right.
Because if we don't, it's not going to be, I liken it to muscle memory, right?
Yes.
So when you're
Yes.
feeling
Yes.
unregulated or you're feeling down and you recognize that, okay, I need to feel better, you can reach into that automatically and be able to pull something out and actually do something about it instead of just making it through to the next hour or to the next day and try
Right.
and
Right.
drag ourselves out of that situation. So,
Right. Yeah, I think, and that will be a perfect segue into our next podcast together, Building on the Light, because those are
yeah,
definitely tools that we can use for building on the light. Once, as we're surviving, we find pieces of light that help us to survive, and then bringing those together and how do you build on that, instead of
absolutely.
building on the trauma, build on the light.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for your authenticity, your openness, and I love the knowledge that you've shared too about the process. And there's so many great bits in here, so that I know that our listeners will really glean good things from. So at the end of my podcast,
hmm
I always like to ask my guest if you have one message of hope for those out there that are struggling or who know somebody who's struggling, what would it be?
you are worthy and you are valuable just the way you are. It's never too late to begin to heal. Healing, we know that our healing journeys, they're not linear. And just because you take a back step doesn't mean you failed, doesn't mean you're weak, just means you had a backslide. And you can make it through. As dark as it may seem today, there is joy to be grabbed, and it is possible for you. And if you feel like you're absolutely drowning and you don't know where to go, reach out for support. And that may be a professional therapist, that may be a friend who you think can understand and who can really offer support, who's not going to offer judgment or offer, here's what you need to do. Because you just
Right.
often just need space to feel and to just be supported. And communities like yours and mine, where people can come and find others who have been through this, that's invaluable. So find other people, whether it's online or whether it's in person, who understand what you're going through. It is connection truly can help us move forward much more than we can on our own. So
Right. Beautiful. Thank you, Sharon, so much. And
absolutely.
I look forward to our next visit.
I do as well. Yes.
Yeah, I just love this. And thank you to our listeners and our viewers for being here. And I hope you got some kind of piece of light that you can take home with you, and hope to see you on our next podcast.